Well, I had written a script called The Eel that was on the blacklist, and Kevin Walsh, who is the president of Scott Free, was producing that film. And when he joined Scott Free, one of the projects that he brought up to Ridley and Janina was The Eel. So they read it, and they'd been working on this Gucci story for a while, and they had tried, I think, with quite a few different writers, and it never quite clicked. And for me, it was such a familiar story because I grew up in Italy and my mother's a fashion designer. And I remember reading, about the murder and thinking, wow, this would be an incredible film. So Kevin brought me in to meet with Janina, and we immediately clicked. She grew up in Costa Rica, but she also lived in Italy, and so there was a lot of synchronicity there. And it was just a very organic process. I really felt the story, and I was very familiar with a lot of the places that the Guccis were in, and that they lived in. So it sort of came out quite naturally. Well, I had a great foundation in Sarah Gay Forden's book. She did this incredible job compiling essentially the biography of the Gucci family, and so I read the book quite a few times, and then I dove into articles from the time period of the 70s and the 80s when the events took place. And the family was so well known, and there was so much information that it was really kind of really fun to sort of become an investigator and go into the Repubblica from 1977 and read at the time what they were saying about the various family members. When I wrote it, I just could not stop thinking about Lady Gaga, and I even said to my friend, I was like, if I could have anybody play this character, it would be Lady Gaga. And yeah, it was just one of those things. I couldn't stop imagining her in the role for many reasons. Um, Obviously, the fact that she's of Italian heritage, the resemblance that she has to Patrizia, the kind of passion and the drama, and the talent. I mean, she's just such an incredible person and so creative. So I really dreamt of her joining the project while I was writing it. So the fact that she ultimately did and did such an incredible job was a gift. One thing that we really talked about was the Shakespearean nature of the story. I think that's something that kept coming up. Um, you could kind of draw lines between the true story and some of Shakespeare's great characters, whether it was Maurizio, who's sort of like a Hamlet. Um, Obviously, Patrizia would be a Lady Macbeth. Paolo's sort of like a buffoon. I mean, there's a lot of parallels with the great Shakespearean tragedies or comedies. Movies like these, like House of Gucci, don't really get made that much anymore. They're not. They're really sort of luxuries. And so to have this kind of film, this kind of story, told with the scope that it's told in, is is an amazing thing. And I think Ridley just really was excited, to jump in and tell a story that takes place over 30 years, with this massive canvas, and these incredible, twists and turns, and it's also genre-wise, it's kind of it's a crime thriller, it's a fashion biopic, it's a love story gone wrong. I mean, it has so many different shades. So I think, he was like a kid in a candy store, really. So this film is about the Gucci family, spanning 30 years, and it's really about uh, the romance at the center of the family that occurs between Maurizio Gucci, who's the heir to the throne, and Patrizia Reggiani, who's a young middle-class Italian girl who is basically being groomed by her mother to marry up in society. And Patrizia meets Maurizio, and their relationship blossoms very passionately and very quickly. And essentially, she starts pushing him or convincing him that the other members of the family needs to be eliminated. And he does so, and he does so quite successfully. And once he's eliminated everybody, he eliminates her as well. So she obviously feels a little resentful about that, and hires a couple of hitmen to off him. That's the story, essentially. Jared Leto was so playful and so I just loved what he did with the character, and there was a real a sense of spontaneity in his performance, even though he took the character and the writing quite literally. Every now and again, he would come up with a line or two or a little nuance that I thought was so beautiful, and the other actors too. I mean, it was just so wonderful to see people take the writing and add to it, and really kind of feel freedom creatively to improve on it and to build on it, whilst at the same time keeping what I had written. You know, Gaga, the moment when she says Father, Son, and House of Gucci, which has now gone, I think, quite viral, that was not in the script, by the way. I have to say that was Lady Gaga's genius ad-libbing. And there was a few lines like that. There was a few lines that I was sitting there thinking, wow, that's a great line. I wish I had written that, you know. Lady Gaga plays Patrizia Reggiani. At the beginning of the story, she's 25. um, and Patrizia is a young Italian girl in Milan with no real career prospects. She's basically a socialite, a very friendly lady who just sort of wants to meet new people. And her mother pushes her a lot into finding a sort of rich upper crust boyfriend. And one night she meets Maurizio at a party, and essentially that begins the story as we know it in the film. She's a woman who starts off uh, quite positive, quite joyful, and ends up being extremely dark and tormented. So it really has an incredible arc, and I think that's one of the things that Lady Gaga does so beautifully in the story is go through these colors and through these shades, and bring a real humanity to the character and a relatability, which I think was very important. The unattainable, in a way, the fact that the Gucci family really are or were the royal family of Italian fashion. Um, I can't think of many other fashion houses that had three generations running through them. And so for her, as for everybody else really growing up in Italy at that time, they represented clothing aristocracy. Um, and of course, the fact that she genuinely, I think, loved Maurizio was an added bonus. But there was a real sense of having achieved the unachievable in a way when she penetrated that barrier of the Gucci relatives. The fact that she managed to do something that I don't think many people would have been able to do. Maurizio's role in the family, I always sort of equated it to Michael Corleone in The Godfather. He's at the beginning, he really doesn't want to have anything to do with it. He honors the legacy. He knows obviously who he is. He knows that the weight on his shoulders is very heavy. But he's also very happy being a lawyer, studying law. Um, he's even happier when he's playing with trucks, when Patrizia's father essentially throws him a bone and hires him to work at the trucking company. So it's a story really for him of quiet acceptance, of slowly owning up to who he is and to his fate, because it is a very kind of a fatal fate in a way that you know, he knows, in a sense, he knows that it's all going to go horribly wrong, because the third generation in any empire, they say the third generation wrecks it, and that's basically what happens. So there's a kind of a sense of doom to his accepting of his role. Adam, being the seasoned actor that he is, and Gaga being such an emotional and passionate performer, I think they really kind of learned a lot from each other, actually. And I think Adam is so controlled in a good way. I mean, he's so in control of his instrument, of his acting, and Gaga, you know, could really kind of go from an explosive take to a much more subtle take and really feel the scene as it was happening. So to watch them together was really quite amazing, just in terms of how they were dancing with each other. And of course, you know, the fact that a lot of the film was shot chronologically, and so you really felt that the relationship was deteriorating as it was happening. And I thought that was a very clever scheduling idea. Rodolfo Gucci is played by Jeremy Irons. He's the patriarch of the family, and even though he's a Gucci and he had a pretty important role in the family business and in the fashion business, he's actually he's an actor. He had a career as a pretty successful silent actor. His pseudonym was Maurizio d'Arcora, and he met Maurizio's mother, Alessandra, who was also an actress, while they were filming some of these short films, or silent films rather. And so Rodolfo has a foot in the past. He's a very melancholic man, and he's incredibly protective of Maurizio, who's his only child. And Maurizio's mother passed away when Maurizio was 5 years old, so there's no mother figure in his life. And Rodolfo is very protective to the point where Maurizio feels like really he can't live his life. And that's a big reason why he rebels against his father. Jeremy, in my mind, is the personification of elegance and of dignity, and he can kill you with a look. He has this incredible intensity to him, and there's a scene in the film when Maurizio and Patrizia have lunch with Jeremy, with Rodolfo, and just watching Jeremy watch Patrizia is a masterclass in nuance, because you know what he's thinking. You know, he's thinking that she's not worthy, but he hides it, and he's very charming in that scene. And there's a lot of layers, you know, and I think only an actor of his caliber and of his subtlety could really kind of beef up that role and add so many subtleties to it. Aldo Gucci is played by an upcoming actor named Al Pacino, who really brought the character to life. And Aldo is he's a snake in the grass, really. He's a very jovial, gregarious man who is taking Gucci in the wrong direction. He's obsessed with profit. He's obsessed with his ego, essentially. And that's one of the things that Patrizia identifies in him and in what he's doing, and one of the reasons why Maurizio ultimately betrays him. But he's a fox. If I had to think of an animal for him, he's a very, very charming, sly fox. And Al has a great a sort of explosive charm to him and a friendliness that is great for the role, because it turns quite dark when we ultimately find out what his motivations are and what he's doing. Well, Aldo is a practical person. Aldo realizes in the 70s, for example, that the Asian market is an incredibly big opportunity for Gucci to grow and to expand and to make a lot of money. And that comes at odds, for example, with Rodolfo's view of what Gucci should be, because Rodolfo thinks it's a museum piece. He thinks that it should be a jewel to be cherished and and cared for, whereas Aldo's a little bit more ruthless about it. Paolo is played by Jared Leto, unrecognizable under a ton of prosthetics. I actually never met Jared, I only met Paolo. Um, and he is Aldo's son. He is a very flamboyant, colorful, failed fashion designer. And he's dying to see his ideas and his creations come to life, and finally he wants some sort of recognition for who he is. And he's always been put down by his father and by the family. And when he tries desperately to convince Rodolfo to give him a chance and Rodolfo mocks him, that's the turning point in his character. And that's when he decides he's going to start Paolo Gucci, which is his line. And he's comic but tragic at the same time. And what Jared did with that character was really infuse him with a kind of a pathetic soul and a sense of emotion that I think was very moving, actually. So Jared would wake up at 4 in the morning every day, and he would spend 5 hours in makeup, and he would come on set as Paolo, and he would leave as Paolo, and he would talk to me as Paolo. And to this day, I only receive emails from Paolo. I don't actually communicate with Jared. Um, but his attitude was completely a full commitment. And the thing that I really admired the most about him was he loved this character. He respected this character. He didn't mock him. He didn't demean him in any way. He didn't find humor out of his failings. He took him very seriously. And I think that humor comes out of that, out of the fact that he's delusional. But it doesn't come out of making fun of the character. And I think Jared had, the sensitivity to really honor him. And I think he did some incredible work. Pina is played by Salma Hayek. Um, Pina is a psychic who, in the movie, Patrizia phones in to. Pina has this show, late night sort of psychic show. And Patrizia calls because she's an insomniac and she's just, eating a tub of ice cream, and she calls in. And they immediately connect. They have this kind of almost like a psychic connection. And they become best friends. It's all about betrayal, and it's all about what people are doing behind the scenes to each other and how they're manipulating each other. Um, and I think there's a lot of great things that they did. I mean, obviously the movie focuses on some of the more salacious details, but the empire, the Gucci empire, is something that truly represents a lot of Italian uh, a lot of Italian culture in the 20th century. I mean, it started in the late 1800s and went on till now. So it's a very important piece of Italian history and of fashion history. The love story at the beginning is a really honest and truthful one, and it's an intimate story. There's no family members involved. There's no media, and that's the section in the film that I think really sells that the relationship is genuine, and that Patrizia truly did fall in love with this man. As the family members enter the canvas, enter the stage, and she realizes that there's an amazing boon to be had in becoming the king and the queen of Gucci. It's a classic story of greed. Greed not only consumes her, it consumes him, it consumes Maurizio, and it consumes the relationship because they can no longer trust each other. Well, I think it's a film that really has its toes in different genres. It's a movie, if you like crime thrillers, it's a crime thriller. It's a fashion gangster movie in a way. It's a love story gone horribly wrong. It's a snapshot of 20 years of fashion. And if you love fashion and you want to see the Italian scene in the 80s, which is really where all those great designers came from, the Versaces and the Armanis and the Ferrés, it's also a time machine, and it brings you back to that time. So it's the wonderful thing about it is that it really kind of taps onto different things, and it doesn't feel like we were constrained to just one genre. Well, I think because Ridley's a painter, and not only is he a masterful director, he's also a painter, and the amount of detail that goes into every frame and every location and every costume is incredible. And I think it's important to honor that and to really give the film the kind of attention that it deserves. And we don't really see movies like this one anymore. It's an experience. It's like a wonderful meal, and you want to really sit down and enjoy it and have a glass of wine with it and really feel like you're in Italy in the 70s and the 80s again. Well, I think it runs the gamut emotionally, and I think you're left with a real sense of loss and a kind of a bittersweet um, feeling of how love sometimes can take really tragic, unexpected turns. And in that sense, as I described earlier, it has this kind of Shakespearean grandiosity and depth. Um, when you read Romeo and Juliet, I don't think you leave feeling good about love, but you definitely feel, and I think that's the key, that the movie really is going to make people feel a lot. It's the quintessential Italian story about the quintessential Italian fashion brand, and the the details in the locations and the food and the lighting and the costumes, everything is so reflective of Italy. And one of the most fun things for me was watching all these cars come back to life, these amazing sports cars and things that I had written as a fanboy, as a car enthusiast, and all of a sudden, right there in front of me was the Lamborghini Countach or the Alfa Romeo Spider or the Fiat, and so I think Italy is such a rich country in terms of its arts and its culture. So this really is also an homage to that, um, an ode to Italian creativity in a sense.